Now, what in this lesson I'm going to show you is a very powerful technique called record sets, or otherwise known as aliased record sets. They're quite powerful. They can save you a lot of time and make your code easier to read and better organized and easier to troubleshoot. So I'm going to get you to open my person query, and if it's not in that state, I'll get you to just put it into that state, title, that full name expression, the asterisk on the end, and I will just start by tidying things up a bit. I'll put the full name on its own line, and I'll put the star on its own line. I will also get you to implement what I've told you is good practice, which is to prefix all the column names with the table name or table alias, in this case PP. So let's just do that. And that still works. Now let's say there is a business requirement to come up with two versions of full name. One is, as we see there, and the other one is the full name as you see there, but with the suffix appended on the end. Now to make this easier to understand, I'll take suffix and I'll just put another selection of that after full name there. And just for the purposes of this exercise, I'll eliminate all the nulls so that we're just working with ones that actually have a suffix. So we'll put that into the where clause. Now, just to make it a little bit easier to read, I'll also put the expression name on its own line there. Now, I'm going to show you the traditional way to do it, which I've shown you so far, which is slightly longer. We would do it like so. And there we go. So the requirement might be that this full name is supposed to be on the header of a letter, and this is supposed to be the signatory or something like that. So what we've done is we've literally taken a copy of our first expression, the basic full name, copied it down here and put suffix on the end. Now that's a little bit duplicative. Now yes, we copied and pasted it, but supposing that the requirement for working out full name changed because we wanted, say for example, a change like we didn't want the first initial, we wanted the full name, the full first name. And because that code's there and that code's there, we'd have to change it twice. So that's a little bit inefficient. I'm going to show you a more efficient way to do it involving record sets, and I'll just do it and then we'll discuss it afterwards. Now I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup here. Notice I've got the title and the suffix twice in the record set, once there and once in the rest of the rows off to the right where I did the pp.star thing. Well, I'm going to get rid of those, and there's a reason I'm doing it, and I'll explain towards the end of the lesson. So I'll just get rid of that extra title, and I'll get rid of that extra instance of suffix, and I'll just execute that, and great. So I will just save that as my person query. Now I'm going to make another saving of that as file save as my person query record set. So now I'm going to use record sets to make this a little bit more efficient. Okay, so what's the result? We now have practically the same result as before, but it's looking a little bit convoluted. Let's break it down. So I've got my select clause. Let's just ignore that for the moment. But we've got the from clause. Then we've got a whole bunch of open bracket, a closed bracket, and an as rs1. And then in the order by, we've actually replaced the PP table name with rs1. What's inside the brackets is a query on its own. It's a standalone query, and what we've done is we have taken that record set, which works fine in itself, and I can prove it because you can highlight a piece of a section of SQL and execute it on its own, and if I do that, that actually works. It's practically the same query we had before in my person query. But what we've done is we've taken that query and we've kind of turned it into a virtual table in its own right. We've put it in brackets and we've aliased the entire record set. So like we can alias tables as we've seen here, we can also alias record sets, actual queries themselves. So the bunch of columns and rows that is returned by that query is now kind of, it's given a name, It's called RS1. The convention with record sets is that they be called RS for record set and a 1 or 2 or 3, depending. I mean, that's not a hard and fast rule. If you give it a name and it's meaningful and someone else comes along and can look at that and know what it means, that's perfectly legitimate. We could call that, extended person or something like that. But for this exercise, let's just call it RS1. So we've taken that record set that we had before and we've called it RS1. So how do we actually get data from it? Well, because that's effectively a table, we can use that in our select clause. So we've gone select rs dot star, and that is the same as saying get me all the columns from this record set. So by virtue of doing that, it's selected full name and it's selected everything from pp.star, and that's what we're seeing. Now the really cool thing about this is that any made up expression within that record set that can be referred to by its name just like any column. So effectively we've made up a virtual table and we've made up a virtual column. Now to give you an example, if I go over here and I select rs1.fullname on its own, there we go. Now of course it's actually there twice because we've got the rs1.star, but you can see my point. I can select that and as on its own as any other column. So it's basically a virtualized and made up column and I can select it. Now thanks to the fact that I can select it, I'll just get rid of that now. I can take that and build it into another expression. In this case I've taken rs1.fullname, which is the same thing as that. Whatever the result that is inside that record set, just take that and append a space and append suffix, and we've got a new expression column. So you can see the benefit is the big long convoluted expression for full name, I only had to write that once, put it in a record set, and then outside of that record set I can refer that to a column and do whatever I like to it. And you can see the benefit, it's more efficient. I can, for example, change full name and get rid of the title. And you know what, let's just do that. Let's say the title, there's a business requirement, the title is not to be part of full name or the suffix expression, so I can just get rid of that, execute that, do it once, and it's built into full name and it's built into full name suffix, job done. Now I'm going to explain why a little bit earlier you saw me get rid of the second instances of title and suffix and from within this record set. So before, just to kind of put it back to the way it was, it had pp.title in it. It also had suffix, but look, let me just put pp.title in there and let's just see what happens. Bang, we've got an error. What does it say? The column title was specified multiple times for RS1, and they're absolutely right. Now, if I do that funny select text and execute, we do indeed have title twice. We've got it once there, courtesy of our pp.star, and we've got it here a second time, courtesy of my explicit selection of it. Now, why is that a bad thing? Well, basically, when you turn this into its own table and we select from it, like rs1.star, that confuses SQL because you've got two columns the same name here and here. When you go rs1.star and you select title, full name, business entity, blah, 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 SQL doesn't know, well, hang on, if you've got title in here twice, it doesn't know if you mean that one or that one. Let's say I just go rs1.title. By virtue of explicitly selecting that, SQL doesn't know, well, hang on, within that set, you've got title here, you've got title here. If you're selecting title, which one do you mean? I don't know. So to have the same column listed twice in a record set, that is actually illegal in SQL. It's perfectly fine in a select statement on its own, but if you put it into a record set, virtualized table, that is a no-no because it confuses the heck out of SQL. So let's just fix that and slightly put things back the way they were. I'll get rid of that second instance of title and I'll put that back to star. So that's selecting all the columns in PP plus our expression column. Bang. And of course on the far left we've got the one that we created outside of the record set. Now we'll also draw your attention to the fact that any references to any of these columns outside of the record set, you have to update the table name accordingly. It's no good to have, say, PP here because literally outside of this record set, SQL doesn't know about the person.person pp table. It effectively doesn't exist outside of this. We've turned the whole thing into RS1. It's literally like changing your name by deed poll. So if we were to put pp.businessentityid as we had before, that would be an error because SQL outside of this record set, it doesn't know about PP. It'd be going, hey, what? That's not in my from clause. RS1 is, but not PP. So it's a potential trap there that we've got to be aware of. Now, it's also perfectly legitimate to treat this table like any other, and we can actually use it to join to other tables. Now, we're going to practice joining between a record set and a table by using the table person.email address. Now, if I just show you this other query window where I've selected everything from person.email address, take it as read that you've got the email address there, and it's got a business entity ID, and that is a foreign key, and it is acting as a foreign key between that and the person table and the person table's business entity ID. So take that as read, and we'll join to it accordingly. So let's do it. And let's just execute that. And hey presto, we have joined from our little virtual table, a record set, joined it to email address, and now we are able to select from that email address table, and there you go. So that's all quite powerful. In fact, it is even possible to say, take this table here and virtualize that as a record set in its own right, and then join the two. Say we could call that RS2, and we could join RS1 to RS2. In fact, why don't we just give that a go, and let's say we're interested in only joining to email addresses that contain the word Stanley. Let's say Stanley is part of the email address. You never know, it might be a requirement. Let's just give it a go. Now I'm going to take the liberty of changing that to an inner join. So we actually get the narrowest combination of that to that. Let's see what happens. That's going to be pretty limited. Yep, there's 24 records there. And if we inner join, we may get possibly a narrower combination, depends on the data. So if we do that, let's just see what happens. Check that out. Note that we can select at the very top here. I have selected the email address from my RS2. So we can refer to other aliased record sets within our query, just like we did the first one. Very powerful indeed, I'm sure you'll agree. Now, as one final tip, you may have noticed that, well, hang on, we've aliased tables here. We just had the table name and the alias, and we didn't have the word as in between, whereas when we aliased the record set, we had the record set and the name, and we did have an as in between. Having the as is optional whenever you're aliasing either a record set or a table. So, aliasing the table is perfectly legitimate. I'll put an as there. It works fine. But you know what? The convention these days is not to have the as, because that's just a little bit easier and quicker to read. So because you don't really need the as when you're aliasing, it's perfectly legitimate to not use as in aliasing our record sets. So I'll just get rid of that, and I'll get rid of that as, and it is perfectly legitimate, works fine. It is up to you if you want to use the word as or not. Whatever you feel makes your code more readable or easier to remember, it's perfectly up to you. So let's have a recap about what we've learned about record sets. Record sets are aliased virtual style tables. Those virtual tables can allow us to reuse expressions within those record sets. They behave the same as tables. They can be selected from, they can be joined to, and the columns inside them can be used to order by. There is a caveat, and that within a record set, we cannot have duplicate column names inside them.